Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL's climate change reporter, Liz McLaughlin, we're talking about the disturbing trend of rising temperatures, specifically heat waves here in North Carolina. Scientists tell us this is due to climate change. The Raleigh-Durham area has on average 40 more high-temperature days per year that pose risk to people than we did back in 1970. By 2050, heat waves in our state are expected to quadruple. Liz, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So I think we all have kind of a working knowledge of what a heat wave is, but what is the actual definition of a heat wave? How hot does it have to be and how long do they last?
Unofficially, when you're sweating.
Okay.
A heat wave is a period of abnormally hot weather, so above the historical average, generally lasting 2 days or more, according to the National Weather Service. High temps coupled with high humidity, as we all know, makes those heat waves even more intense and dangerous. They begin when high pressure in the atmosphere moves in and pushes warm air toward the ground, and that air warms up further as it's compressed, and we begin to feel a lot hotter. The high pressure system pressing down, it expands vertically, diverting other weather systems. So it even minimizes things like cloud cover and wind, making the air just even more suppressing. And this is also why heat wave can kind of park itself over an area for several days or longer.
So understanding now that they're more frequent, these heat waves, what are the stats on heat waves in our area and in North Carolina in general?
I had sort of an idea, but when I really started digging into the numbers, it was pretty mind-blowing. I mean, the Southeast has been warming about a half a degree per decade. Doesn't sound like much, but with local temperatures, that increased nearly 6 degrees since 1970. And Raleigh has 18 and a half more days that are 95 degrees or hotter than it did in 1970. That's according to an applied climate information system. By 2030, that's projected to jump to 48 and then 70 days by 2050, according to Climate Central. North Carolina currently averages about 10 dangerous heat days. That's very high heat, I believe, in the 100-degree range each year. And by 2050, the state's projected to see almost 60 of these days each year.
That's amazing. And so how does climate change play a role in this?
So it's actually a large indicator that climate change is happening. And as average global temperatures rise with climate change, so do the number of those dangerously high heat days. So we're seeing an increase in the frequency, intensity, size, duration are all increasing of these heat waves. And there's even, we talked about it a few days ago, Show Your Stripes Day. There's this graphic that really spells it out. And it has just a stripe for each, year since 1850, and you can see if it's below average or above average, basically, and it goes from blue to red just so clearly, these stripes. It's really jarring, and they're just getting darker, more intense, and we actually have new models in recent years that really help us figure out how much of this can be applied to human-caused climate change, because heat waves have existed in the past, but they're happening more often. There's more extreme temperatures, and in places where they didn't used to before. We look at some of the recent extreme heat events, and some of these models say that is as much as 100 times more likely because of climate change.
Wow, that's really interesting. Well, we will be right back after the break. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. So obviously, a lot of us complain when temperatures are hot. And, we say, oh, my gosh, it's too hot. We've had a hot summer, I think, so far in North Carolina. And yet it doesn't pose anything but maybe an inconvenience to a lot of us. But when the temperatures dramatically increase, there are people who have health issues, and these people are put at risk. So what are some of the groups that should be concerned about high temperatures?
It really can have an impact on anyone, but especially those most vulnerable, the elderly, young children, people with other pre-existing conditions, people who have to work outside. They can't just sit inside in the air conditioning all day. These are people that are really at risk. And we think about extreme weather events like hurricanes, maybe catch our attention, seem dangerous, but heat actually is the number one weather-related killer. And obviously, as temperatures increase, so do those risks. And And the heat also causes other things. For instance, ozone pollution. We see increases in stagnant air days, is what is called. And that can put people at risk who have asthma, heart conditions. A lot of these go hand in hand when that extreme heat comes and can lead to a lot of other emergency room visits and even deaths.
And so that's obviously something we all need to be aware of, not just, don't take your pet out or don't go for a run. We need to really be thinking about how this could affect our health. Well, let's talk about the urban heat island. That was a phrase I'd never heard before. And basically it means it's hotter in the city than it is in other parts, in rural areas, for example. And of course, a lot of Americans, I think the stat in your report was 80% of Americans live in cities. So it's much hotter. Why is it hotter in a city?
So this is interesting. Urban heat island, something I really just started to get interested in. I knew that there was a difference, but didn't realize how much. A lot of it is development, actually. And really, a lot of this huge variability in these temperatures can be avoided with the right planning. But even in somewhere like Raleigh, it can be 19 degrees hotter in certain places in the city than in just a few miles out in a rural setting where there's some cover, where there's soil, grass to kind of absorb the heat. Now we're seeing all this development, concrete buildings, pavement, even items like cars that can absorb, retain, and reflect heat that's actually increasing that. And just on average, just being in Raleigh as opposed to a rural area right outside of it, your summer will be 2 degrees hotter on average.
Wow, that's interesting. And I would imagine when you look at a city that's more developed, like New York City, for example, you're probably looking at even higher temperatures in a place like that because the development is so compact and so dense compared to Raleigh. So you also looked at the fact that low-income neighborhoods tend to be hotter. Is that because you find a lot of those in cities?
And if you just think about it, when you're driving through a really high-end neighborhood, there's usually a lot of really nice trees. Those are very expensive to kind of maintain. Other parks kind of filtered in. We tend to take a lot of that development into lower income areas. And, places like parks, a lot of people want to live near those. So it increases property value. So the people, and we've seen this with lots of other parts of climate change, the people who are suffering the most are the people who can least afford to. And so the effects of that are also hitting the most vulnerable people. I mean, we look at elderly children living in poverty. Those are most of the people dying from heat. Maybe they don't have air conditioning in their home. Maybe they don't have access to preventative health care or even education to know when they're suffering from something like heat stroke.
So obviously, this is a concern because you're talking about it only getting worse. What does the future look like in terms of extreme heat?
In short, yes. I know a lot of my colleagues call me the apocalypse reporter, but it's not all doom and gloom. Yes, projections are expected to continue with these warming trends. Even if we cut all of our greenhouse gas emissions right now, there's still a level of warming that would continue to occur from what we've emitted so far. But a lot of researchers I talk to agree there's a big variability here. So how much we cut and how soon can make a difference between seeing 10 or 20 more dangerous heat days in our local area or 60 or 70.
So it's up to us.
Exactly.
Liz, thank you so much for breaking this down and explaining this. And for more news from WRAL, sign up for the WRAL Morning Briefing newsletter. You'll be informed and ready to face the day with one concise email. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter. Thanks for listening.